And so the woman reports it to HR, and HR really is no longer HR. It really should be called HER, because it focuses almost always a complaint by the woman about usually a man. And
do you know what the stats are in proportion of workplace complaints that are brought forth by women compared to men?
I know the OCR stats, the Office of Civil Rights stats about complaining is about, I think there's a fellow named Joseph Eck who's done the research on that. And I think he said it was like 19-1, 19 complaints by women about men for each one complaint by men about a woman.
Right. And that's funny because, the men probably generate the grounds for complaints more often, being more disagreeable. And the women are more sensitive to the negative consequences, being less emotionally stable, more neurotic. So that's a place where men and women don't feed back so well to one another, and it's unfortunate, but well, I have wondered, if men and women can inhabit the same workplace over time. We don't know that. I mean, I've been called reprehensible for even bringing that up as an issue, but it's not like we know. We haven't, the data aren't in. We've only been working together in some sense for 50 years. And there's plenty of evidence for sex segregation. It seems to be the norm rather than the exception that, once a sex starts to dominate a field, that dominance becomes more and more predominant until it becomes almost total. You see that with engineering. You see it with nursing. Those are extreme cases, but it certainly does happen. Well, they're not as extreme as bricklaying, which is like all men, but women haven't moved into the bricklaying domain, so we don't know what would happen if they did. They won't, so we won't know, but.
No, and the challenge here is really enormous because in the sexual area, it's very rare that a woman is interested in dating somebody at work who is earning less than she is, and doesn't have as high status. And usually, the great majority of women that I've seen that were single when they entered the workplace and then married somebody, a significant percentage of them have married somebody in the workplace, but the great majority of that significant percentage have married somebody at least at their level and usually above them at work.
Yeah, it's hypergamy, right? And it characterizes women with regard to potential for generous earning, essentially. And unsurprisingly, I think it's an attempt to balance the economic scales because women take the brunt of pregnancy and the brunt of the first year of child rearing, I would say as well. So, and they make themselves vulnerable as a consequence. So they need to redress that inequality. And that's how they do it. But there are consequences to that are very severe in the socioeconomic and the social spheres.
Absolutely. And then when a man above her does take interest in her and is explicit about it, it can either result in courtship or a law court. And so
courtship of one form or the other.
Yes, one courtship of one form or the other. And so it's a really and what the biggest problem that's happened in the last 15, 20 years, especially since #MeToo, is that I have not yet spoken to a single corporate CEO who has not said some version of the following to me. Warren, I used to love mentoring women, but I have a wife and I have children. There's no way, shape, or form that I will mentor a woman today.
Right.
There's the
right. Well, it was increasingly insisted upon in my workplace at the university that if I ever had a female in the room with me, that the door be open. I mean, and as soon as that's the rule, you're done. You have to start rethinking everything. Can you travel with your graduate students? Can you be in the same hotel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? As soon as you have to start thinking about those things, that means the risk has become so great that you're much less likely to engage in such activity. And mentoring is a very intimate relationship. So it is,
and it's oftentimes does. Many men are particularly inspired to mentor to a woman who's younger that is attractive, and many younger attractive women are increase their caring about and their love for a man who they see as a result of his mentoring. Across
cultures, women prefer men who are about 4 years older. There's some variation, and that actually is one of the things that is moderated in the Scandinavian cultures. So that age gap is less rather than more in the Scandinavian cultures. but that goes along with the general tendency to hypergamy, which is preference for a mate who's at or above you in the social hierarchy,
Yes.
or the socioeconomic hierarchy. It's really the social hierarchy, though.
Which create enormous problems in different cultures, like in China. When we do analyses of the most popular dating site in China, you see that women want a very high percentage of women. I think it's in the 92 to 93 percentile, approximately, of women want men who own homes and own cars. But of the people on the dating sites who are males, only a very small percentage of them own homes and cars.
Right. And we should also point out that women aren't actually going for the home or the car. They're going for the ability to produce the home and the car.
Of course, yes.
Right. They're using them as secondary markers for competence, essentially. And then they, you cite an interesting stat here too, which I thought was worth talking about. On who should pay the bill on the first date. 72% of women think that a man should pay the full bill on the first date. Now, remember, they've already selected this man. And what that means is that he's likely to be at or above them in the socioeconomic hierarchy, and perhaps slightly older. So, in some sense, he can afford to pay better than she can. But in any case, 82% of men think the same. And so men are playing the hypergamy game even more intensely than women are, at least with regards to that particular statistic.
And this gets into the psychology of the pay gap, because many women feel okay about that, because they feel like, okay, men earn more than I do for the same work. And in fact, that is not really accurate. Here is what is accurate. Fathers earn more than moms do. The pay gap is not men, women. The pay gap is dads versus moms. And when dads become dads, they're far more likely to give up the things that they love to do that pay less, and do the things that they like to do a lot less. Quit that musician gig that paid much less and do something responsible, quote unquote, like selling product Y.
And that's also in line with the data that show that, most young men, many young men, abuse alcohol. Most of them stop when around 27, but that's also when they get married. And so they stop engaging in primary gratification. And that's another example of that delay of gratification, as far as I'm concerned, that ability or willingness to sacrifice.
Yes, it is also part of your whole rule about it's important to have stable structures, but it's also important to have flexibility in structures. And part of
it's so funny that it's so rare that we can have a real conversation about this, because let's say that the pay gap, it's certainly not obvious what degree the pay gap is caused by female hypergamy, right? If men demanded of their dating partners that they earned more than they do, my guess is that there'd be a pay gap in favor of women, because men are incentivized to earn more, because if they don't, the consequences in the sexual market, but it's not the sexual, it's the intimate interpersonal market, right? To not be cynical about it, because it's not all short-term mating that people are motivated by. Quite the contrary. Well, they're motivated to take the more dangerous, less desirable, farther away from home and family and interest, for that matter, jobs, because the payoff is disproportionately large for men who do so. And you see that, and it's exaggerated at the upper end of the distribution as well, which is what you pointed out with regards to the dating sites. Like 70% of men are rated as below the 50th percentile in attractiveness by women. And so not only are there rewards for earning more, there are disproportionate awards for men for earning more. And that goes along with the proposition that we put forward at the beginning of this conversation. I think that was recorded as well, that the most admired people are men, but the least admired people are men as well. And there's a lot more least admired men than there are most admired men. And that's true in brutal force on the dating scene, on the websites.
Absolutely.